Alright. Hello. If, um, my name is Ryan, and this is my first real video where I talk about something, if anyone's actually gonna watch this. I'm just tired of life right now, so I'm just gonna rant about it for a little bit. I don't really care if I get hate for this or something, but yeah. I live in America, and I really don't like the way modern society works in a lot of ways. I have experienced firsthand how shitty the American education system is for both the students and the teachers. I was hurt in elementary school by the principal of it. I'm not going to talk about any specific things or people, but yeah, I've been through some shit when I was a little kid and didn't realize it. And after that, it took a few years for me to go back to normal, I guess, because I have autism and I was treated like some kind of outcast, or like I was mentally disabled in elementary school when they learned that. And I was hurt a lot by the principal there. That's all I'm going to say on that. Um, Throughout my middle school years, I didn't really do much of actual middle school because I was incredibly overwhelmed for my freshman year there because my previous school had about like 150 people, and that school had about 1,000. And I could not deal with that many people. I could barely deal with the amount of people in my elementary school. And like, I'm an introvert, so I don't really like talking much unless it's just with talking to someone I already know well. Um, uh, in high school, I learned a lot about how school itself worked, and I realized my teachers were dealing with some shit. Like, I felt bad for them, and they this was a lot worse in my last 2 years of high school. But I noticed in my first 2 years of high school, my teachers I would hear some of them sometimes talking about how they're dealing with a lot of problems in their classes over the phone, to like the principal, I'm assuming, or something, and they were dealing with a lot, and they were barely getting paid because I looked up how much teachers are getting paid from multiple different sources at the time, and it was dog shit. Now, teachers seem to get paid less than the average construction worker, of all things. And that's stupid. I believe any good teacher should probably be paid, like, at least almost as much as a doctor. Because I've seen how my parents are a solid 8 out of 10 on the parent scale, and they can barely deal with 3 kids. I can't fucking imagine having to deal with like 30 kids, much less, I'd say like 120 if you're a high school teacher every day. That just sounds like a nightmare, and to get paid basically jack shit for that is insane. I respect any and all teachers who can keep it together as a teacher for any length of time, even with all the shit that they have to go through. That's also another big problem with the school system, is that you don't learn anything there. Um, I noticed this a lot in high school. I noticed we would really just learn about major wars and who each president was and the biggest things they did, really, and occasionally something about the French Revolution or the British people or the British, how that led to America being born, I guess. And that was basically it. Um, they seem to be using the same books that they used 10 years ago for history specifically. Um, I've noticed in my last year of high school, and when I got to the end of the history book for homework stuff, they didn't have anything past Obama in it at all. Anything really, except for just a footnote of how America's a lot different now, basically. And they seem to just be stuck in the past, the school system. Not the teachers themselves, of course. I mean, the schools are just, it seems to be like the education is stuck in the past. They don't tell you how to file your taxes. In fact, one of my better teachers in high school tried to teach the kids how to file taxes personally, like out of their own time, and that was great because that was something actually useful in the modern era. But we didn't learn that from the actual curriculum. We learned that because a teacher took the time out of her day to help us personally with it. And we just seem to be regurgitating the same information year after year during high school. So I looked into why that might be. Is it just because schools get paid like shit? No. The biggest reason I think I found for this regurgitation of specific bits of knowledge is the standardized statewide testing. I don't remember exactly what it was called. I think it was something like that, where you have to every student has to take a test like every year to tell where their level is at. And so this affects how the school gets paid, from what I understand, in some way. And because of that, basically the entire school curriculum is going to be based around those tests and the questions that might be on those tests. So you will only be learning the information relevant to those tests so the schools can get paid more. Again, this is in my experience, not necessarily everyone's experience. This is just for what I have been through personally. So if your experiences are different than mine, then I am not discounting other people's experiences. Um, but this seems to be a pretty prevalent issue. Another one is the brain rot of Gen Alpha. This is probably been beaten to death about. People have been beating the dead horse about this for a while, but this is still a huge problem I felt like I should talk about. Parents can't afford to parent anymore. Some parents, of course, are just horrible, but a lot of parents just can't afford to raise their next generation anymore because we can barely afford to pay for ourselves in the first place. In the 1960s, a average man could work an average job and could get enough money to pay for himself, his wife, and any partner, and his kids on top of that, and still have some left over. Now, a man can barely pay for himself. The average rent where I live to rent a house is around $6,500. Our rent is a lot less than that because our landlord is nice, but ours is still a ridiculous amount. The power bill is also ridiculous because the company who runs the power for the area I live in are pieces of shit. And we used to get power outages every other month, basically. One time it lasted for a week of no power. And yeah, sorry, that's a bit of a tangent, but basically, the school system sucks right now. And I have genuinely learned more about history from YouTube than I have from school. And I've learned actual interesting stuff too, like stuff you should be taught in school, like about this politician named Cassius Marcellus Clay, not the boxer who named himself after him, but the original guy, the one who was the son of one of the wealthiest slave owners in America, who ended up despising slavery and ended up doing a lot of important, amazing things to help America. He was the reason the Emancipation Proclamation was signed when it was. And he is never taught about, not even a little bit. This is the kind of shit that should be taught about in school, but it's not. And you only learn outdated information that hasn't been updated at all in 10 years about the most important events in only American history. You don't even have like a bit about like Japanese history and how they transitioned into a more modern country and stuff, except for the Opium Wars. That's it. That's all you get about them. But there's so much more than that. The there's the culture of Japan where I don't really want to get into specifics of that, but like it's stuff like that. You don't learn anything interesting about other countries. And because of this, people don't have any opinions on these other countries really, except that they were an enemy of our country or something at one time. So this can lead to some polarization. And this is a separate problem. This is probably one of the biggest modern problems in America right now is polarization. Polarization is destroying us. The current landscape of the media profits off of the most polarizing things they can think of because that gets them more clicks, even if it's for hate. This is rage baiting. And what the media says, whether it be politically, economically, about the housing crisis, about school, whatever, it's designed to be polarizing and to make people hate each other and to turn it into an us versus them. Stuff like liberals versus conservatives, which is stupid as well, because they're supposed to be two different sides of one major country. Stuff like the gender war, where it's man versus woman, and any situation where it's us versus them, is partially the media's fault. And they are forcing it that way more and more. And I hate that so much. I hate how it has to be us versus them. It has to be liberals versus conservatives. It has to be women versus men. And the other side is, and every other opinion is wrong, no matter what. I despise that. I hate stuff like that. I hate how it's so normalized, how people can call people horrible shit over the internet like Nazis, and it's just shrugged off as like, but do you really think he's a Nazi? Because it's all been watered down because no one has any personal consequences for what they say over the internet. And it's the polarization is destroying us, where it leads to people having opinions like some woman will think all men, every men are horrible monsters. I will say, yes, there are many men who do horrible things. There are also women who do horrible things. But this is not something that should be generalized. Generalizing an entire group of people for the actions of a few or even a pretty big amount is horrible. It is continuing a cycle of hate and revenge where the oppressors become the oppressed and the oppressed become the oppressors again and again. When in the end, we are all just humans. We're all just the same evolved monkeys. We are just the same group of idiots we've always been. We're all humans. We're not different people. We're all just people trying to live in this world. We need to work together instead of against each other. Doesn't matter if you're conservative or liberal, or if you're a man or a woman, if you're religious or atheist. I just think we're all human, and we all just need to remember that we're all the same species, and we can't go back to just hate and hate for hate's sake. Sorry if that was a bit cringy or something. If I get hate for this, I don't care. I'm just voicing my opinions on the internet. That's all. Goodbye.